Something that totally baffles people who are not professional musicians is the fact that we musicians have to have two brains. They're completely different mindsets that control how we act in the practice room and how we are on stage. I think it's fair to say that we musicians have to cultivate, well, split personality. But what does that actually mean in practice? Is it even healthy, and why is it necessary? First of all, let's talk about what I call the practice brain or practice personality. Here we are trained to hear every detail, every nuance. We're trained to hear dynamics. We're trained to hear articulation, rubato, tempo, bowings, phrasings, intonation, right, wrong notes, you name it. We have to hear every single last detail because that's what our audience will be hearing. And then it's even more specific depending on the instrument. For example, with a cello or a string instrument, you have to think about string crossings, you have to think about vibrato. With the piano, you have to think about the three pedals you have, and yes, the middle pedal is used, and on for each individual instrument. There's so much to think about. So how does this work in practice? Well, basically, we are diagnosticians. We have to find some place that isn't working the way we want it. Slow it way down. We have to analyze it. We have to break it into component parts. Find out what's working, what's not working, extremely analytically. I even have a mental checklist and a physical checklist I give to my students just to make sure that they're covering every base. Okay, once you've found that, you have to put it together slowly, make sure everything, at least in part, is right, and then layer in more and more of what you want to do. That's at a slow tempo, and then very slowly bring it up to tempo with several repetitions. Many musicians, myself included, even do this. They will say, I have to get at least 10 repetitions of this in a row. And if I make a mistake, I've got to start all over again. And why is that? Because it's what I call bulletproofing. If you make a mistake during practice when the pressure is relatively low, because it's just you, what do you think is going to happen when you go on stage? So it isn't the case where a lot of people think you practice it until you get it right. No. When you get it right is just the beginning. That's when the repetitions start. Guess what? The French say répéter, to repeat. They don't say, I'm practicing the cello. They say, I'm going to répéter. And that's what it really is. You've got to do many, many repetitions. It may need to be brought up to a faster tempo, like I say. And then you only have that small section. It may not work in the phrase. So what you now have to do is get the whole phrase with that section in it and repeat that. Well, in the end, you may have hundreds, if not thousands, of repetitions of that section and the phrase it lives in, just to ensure it's exactly the way you want it. And that's just the basic level, just to make sure everything's neat and clean. And you do this for every section of every moment of every piece that you're playing. Well, why is it necessary to go beyond the point where you get it right and do so many repetitions? Well, the answer is the human brain doesn't work like a computer. If you're working on, for example, a paper and you say save, the next day when you open it up again, it is where you left it. There's no changes unless something was wrong with the cloud you saved it on or something like that. But our brains don't work that way. The repetition builds reliability. And professionals will do so much repetition because the pressure is on when you go on stage. Remember, you're bulletproofing. You have to start with the base level, and the base level is an absolutely clean performance where you're not making any mistakes. You're following all the dynamics. You're following everything that you want to do musically with the performance. Training in this way builds up muscle memory, automaticity, and reliability. Isaac Stern said that before his debut in Carnegie Hall, he would ask his roommate to wake him up at 2 a.m. and demand that he play a certain section of a certain piece, just to make sure that it would be reliable, even if he was half awake. And that's the standard. That's the truth about performing artists. We have to make sure that we can be absolutely dependable, not just for the audience, but to ourselves. Because if we start breaking down on stage, we start to doubt ourselves, and that could severely impact the performance. So that's the first type of brain that musicians have to have, the diagnostic brain, and the ability to repeat, the patience to repeat, to make sure everything is bulletproofed and ready to go. But What about the other type of brain? Is it similar? Nope. Because here's the thing. If you walk on stage with that first type of brain, your performance is dead in the water. Because now we're onto the performance brain, and it's almost the polar opposite of the first type of mindset. Because now you're on stage, and now you have to react to the audience in real time, spontaneously. You have to react to the other musicians you're playing with. You're in a flow state. I often feel like I'm not even the one playing it, but I'm observing and listening to myself play it and saying, oh, I hope he takes a little more time here. I hope he gives a little more of a vibrato here. Oh, the pianist is going a little faster. I hope he adjusts it. And that can only be achieved with that first brain. But if you walk on stage with that analytical mindset, it's all over, because everything inside of you is telling you the moment you hear something that isn't absolutely perfect, you want to stop and fix it. But in this performance state, in that flow state, you must complete. You must keep going through. Music exists in time, like theater and other performing arts that exist in time, and you can't stop, and you can't allow your brain to stop the way it's used to doing in that analytical state. That checklist mindset that I talked about earlier, it has to be suppressed when you're on stage. Maybe not entirely, because you want to make sure everything's going fine, but not in terms of stopping and fixing things. That will kill it. So is there any way to cultivate that split personality? Should it even be cultivated? Yes, it has to be. Here's the thing. When you're a student, you learn to do this. You learn to practice in that analytical way. But the problem is most students do not practice that second brain, that performance brain. And the only way to practice that is to give performances. But students don't have the opportunity to give 50 or 60 concerts a year. So what do? You have to schedule run-throughs. If you can do it in a hall, that's great. But usually most students don't have access to a hall, let's say once a week, so they get 50 run-throughs in. You can do it in your living room, though. You can simulate it. You can have your phone on. You can mentally imagine there are people here. You can invite people there. But that part has to be practiced. You have to learn to turn off one mindset and turn on the other on a dime. So have you heard of that 90%, 10% rule? See, a lot of amateurs can sound really, really good, almost as good as professionals. You have a remaining 10% to sound that professional level, but that remaining 10% might be 5 times the practice that an amateur does. It's unfair, maybe, but that's the way life is, not just with music, with a lot of things. In one sense, the difference is tiny, almost sometimes not noticeable. And that's because the difference, that 10% difference in that realm, things become exponential. The amount of time you have to put in, the amount of concentration, the amount of repetitions you have to do to get it. Students need to know this, and they often, when they get to a very high level, realize, wow, if I want to be a professional, at least professional performer, because there's many professions in music, but a professional performer, I'm really going to have to do all this extra work. So I do say that most people who have a love of music, almost all of them, can become professional musicians, but the commitment is enormous. I don't think we're special, though. I think to become a professional in anything, you have to put in tons and tons of effort. If you have a day job, you work 40 hours a week. Well, practicing 4 or 5 hours a day for 7 days, it adds up mathematically. So we're not anything special, but it's important to realize that that effort is there if you want to become a professional performer. But is all of this healthy? I mean, musicians have a reputation for having different personalities, let's say. I'm willing to admit that. So is it a healthy thing? Well, I say, of course, it depends on the person, but for the most part, yes, it is. Musicians are creatives. We need to express ourselves. But if we're going to do it professionally, these are the things we need to do. We need to have those two brains. We need to be able to split our personalities, basically. So I think this split personality is just a feature of the professional musician. We build up this technique just so we can walk on stage and transcend it and give you the best of ourselves, communicating the great music of the world. But what do you think? Did this surprise you? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.